In terms of, there's also been a lot of news around various trademark issues around domains. You know, it's a relatively new thing that seems to be coming up. Is people have either owned domains for a while, which have since become trademarks. Like, for instance, with MySpace, I found was a classic example where somebody already owned myspace.co.uk before MySpace was the social networking site was born. But because they then turned it into basically a pay-per-click thing, they turned it to bad faith. MySpace won the case to get to hand over that domain to them. Is this something you guys are seeing on a regular basis as well, the sort of issue around trademarks and the associated domains?
Yeah, intellectual property law is definitely a very hot topic, and it's also very important for domain owners to appreciate that companies and corporations have a right to defend their trademarks. In that example, in the MySpace example, the domain owner actually won back his domain in an appeal just last week, so MySpace gave the name back to him. Certainly, it's a very interesting topic, and as rights holders ourselves, we take it very seriously. So at Sedo, we have a groundbreaking program called the Rights Protection Program, which is something that no other secondary market provider has, which basically allows rights holders to look on our site, and when they see domain names listed for sale with us that they think might infringe upon their rights, they can log that in a report to us, and we investigate it internally and remove the domain name from our database. So rather than taking a reactive stance, we're being very proactive about it and really trying to enable those rights holders to defend their rights, while at the same time allowing domain owners who own legitimate dictionary generic domain names to continue buying and selling their names in a responsible way.
Right. And in terms of the sort of average user, how the sort of home user who now wants to create a family website, and is that something? Are people using that, or are people turning to just social networks or to blogs and things like that? Or are you finding an increase in the number of people who just want basic things just for themselves?
That's an interesting one, actually, because there is a huge growth in social networking, isn't there? And I was just reading a survey today that said, in terms of online advertising, the one area where click prices were probably not going to decrease was in social networking, but that a lot of advertisers didn't know how to use that medium correctly. I think a lot of people are certainly still buying personal domain names, but they're probably choosing a less commercial extension. So, for example, I could register norananiakara.me.uk. So there's certainly, most registries do provide a less commercial extension for people who just want to use a domain name for personal use.
Right. And finally, I mean, the explosion of domain names across, especially TLDs. So, you know, we've now got .eu as well, and .asia, those two that are things, and I believe there are more other versions on the way. At what point does this become overload for people who just can't keep up with the, you know, if they're trying to do a direct navigation? At what point does it just become too much for them to deal with?
There certainly is a very wide variety of extensions out there, but recent studies have shown that consumers tend to stick with what they know best. So a recent YouGov survey showed that I think 62% of UK residents will choose a co-UK address above anything else, which is why, for example, at Sedo we're seeing a huge increase in the trade of .co.uk domain names, and they're also one of the growing secondary domain name TLD markets. But I think things like .asia and .mobi certainly have a place. .mobi in particular, I think, was surprisingly well received, perhaps because of the convergence between mobile and IT and so on, that we're moving to a kind of a place where people are on the go all the time, constantly on their PDAs and mobiles. So perhaps companies are going to look at the .mobi extension as a way to market their products and services in the mobile era. But I think more importantly, it's probably something that a lot of companies use to just defensively protect their brands. So, for example, Sedo goes out and we own Sedo.de, practically every extension you can think of, simply because we need to ensure that if those markets do become very important, that we are there and we don't end up having to pay $80,000 again. So it's certainly important.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Sure, thank you very much for having us here.
This is Ian Williams for VNUnet, signing off.